Hi, this is Bruce Whipple, and welcome to the Business Acquisition Podcast. This is where we talk about how to acquire an already profitable business rather than build one from scratch. In the past 25 years, I've acquired several businesses, and I've also built several businesses from scratch. And I can tell you that it's a lot easier to do the former rather than the latter. You may know me from my association with Dan Pena, who I've worked with and been partners with for more than 25 years. Dan is gracious enough to mention me quite often in his videos, and it's been a real pleasure working with Dan, and one of the few people that I call a true friend. And actually, we've worked on many acquisitions together as well. And even though I said it was easier to acquire a business rather than build one from scratch, that doesn't necessarily mean it's easy. I often say that QLA is simple, but please don't make the mistake of thinking that simple is the same thing as easy. It still requires hard work. I've had a lot of calls in the last couple of weeks where mentees have picked dream teams and then had to make changes to their dream team. And one of the things that drives that is they have a sense of urgency towards building their dream, and they really want to get that done as soon as possible. And I think the best example was someone who built a dream team incredibly fast, felt that the credentials were good on the group, and then in about 6 weeks started to run into the situation where the chairman he had selected said, well, I'm not sure that you can get people to work on a success-oriented deferred fee basis. I'm not sure that you can end up getting acquisitions without a big bankroll and having any kind of chance to finance them. And it pointed out a bunch of things. How do you pick dream team members, and how do you make sure that after you've gone through that selection process that you've got the right people? And so I wanted to spend a few minutes to talk about what are the criteria for picking dream team members. One of the things to understand is that these are non-executive positions. And what does that mean? That means that they will be giving advice. They'll probably have to spend something like 3 to 5 hours a week. But in times of acquisitions, oftentimes all bets are off. And one of the issues that one of the mentees that I deal with and mentor ended up having was one of his board members said, well, how many of these acquisitions do you think you're going to do? And he said, well, I think I'm going to shoot for 60 acquisitions in 5 years. That turns out to be one a month. And while I certainly am behind an aggressive plan, his dream team member, who was an attorney, said, that's one a month. That is not a part-time job if we're doing some of the due diligence. And you want your dream team to at least be able to do the initial due diligence. That's why you want a chairman that's got mergers and acquisition experience. You want an accountant, retired accountant. You want a retired lawyer, preferably, so that they can basically help you walk through a model of what are the things we should be looking out for in these acquisitions. How do they stack up? Do we have a letter of intent on this acquisition so that when you bring this acquisition potential to your professionals, accountants and lawyers, that you have a pretty good chance that it's actually going to hold and that you're not going to ask your professionals to work on a deal that's going to crater, particularly since you're asking them to work on a success-oriented deferred fee basis. Okay, so what are the criteria? I first look for dependability. Unless someone is dependable, can you count on them? Can they show up when they're supposed to show up? I don't even care about any other talents that they might have. I pass on them just for that. Probably the next one is a sense of urgency. There are times when you are going to desperately need to reach a dream team member. After all, they're there to provide counsel in the been there, done that role. And if you try to reach them and they say, well, I'm on vacation, talk to me in two weeks, or I'm in the middle of a project, give me a call in a month and I'll get back to you, that just isn't going to work for you. Now, one of the things that a lot of people misunderstand is you really need to make sure that if you're following the QLA model that Dan Pena originated back in the 1990s for acquisition, that's primarily based on you not having the capital just to write a check to do an acquisition. So you need to raise the finance, you need to get your professionals to work on a success-oriented deferred fee basis, And if you are bringing on Dream Team members who work from corporations, oftentimes they didn't have any of those issues to deal with. When they wanted to do an acquisition, they asked their in-house counsel to get together with their outside counsel and just go ahead and do that. Same with the accounting. Have their CFO or accounting functions internally work with a due diligence team on the outside, and they would write all those checks from operations. They don't need any special financing most of the time. They either had great financial facilities that they could deem appropriate to do an acquisition from, or they just fund it out of operations. This is much, much different. So you want to be sure that they understand what the QLA process is, that you're going to be bringing a dream team together on a success-oriented basis where they receive equity. You're not going to ask them for capital. You're not going to ask them to sign documents. You're going to have to get to the accountants and lawyers that you want to retain on a success-oriented deferred fee basis, which oftentimes is a new experience for them, and they don't understand that. And then you're going to need to raise the finance. All of those things, although they've done maybe hundreds and maybe thousands of acquisitions, maybe they never went through that kind of a process. So I would highly encourage you to have a discussion up front with them about what the QLA process is, what the process is you're going to go through, so that you are sure they're on board. In the case of the mentee whose board chairman fell apart, it basically was exactly that. He didn't cover that up front. He later on, when they got down to much closer to acquisitions, he began to voice all his concerns, and that basically he wasn't on board with the process, wasn't a cheerleader for the mentee, and that just obviously didn't work. So what happened? We developed a criteria at that point, went back out, started to look for additional chairmen that we could basically pre-qualify towards those requirements. But because the initial pre-qualification wasn't good enough, you've lost time, you've lost money, and you've also got to deal with the situation, since you probably have other board members, of why your chairman has decided to leave. Now, the magic words you want to hear from a Dream Team member that you talk to is, if I can add value, I'm interested. Most of the time, they're not going to say, how much equity am I going to get? How much compensation am I going to get? They're going to be interested, if they're senior people, in what they can add in terms of value. And a lot of times that's because it's reasonably hard to find actual mentees that are worthy of their efforts. So when they find a person who's an entrepreneur going after something with a sense of urgency and is committed to getting it done, that is music to their ears oftentimes. So that's certainly, you want to go through that process with them. Then once you've gotten Dream Team members, they understand the QLA process, you're comfortable with their work ethic and how much time they can give you, and that they do have a sense of urgency, you're going to need to do a little bit of work towards finding conflicts that may be in their past. And you would be surprised how often you find either litigation. Just because you've been in litigation doesn't mean that's a problem, but understand what that's about. Understand if they file bankruptcy, things like that. Because your professional firms will do conflict checks primarily to see if the people on your board might have conflicts with their clients. But you don't want them to uncover some things that are going to cause you a real problem in terms of the relationship, and having your professionals wonder why you didn't vet that person. In fact, I recently had a mentee who had someone who looked great for a chairman. We went through that process, and he found out basically he had pleaded guilty to a felony of defrauding investors. Probably not the kind of guy you want on your board. Okay. The other thing that's really important to these people is their reputation. Oftentimes, they have spent a career building their reputation, and while people who didn't do this would also say it, I think it's important to point out to them that the proof will be in the pudding, but you respect the reputation that they've built. You plan to run this company that in a way that honors that reputation, and if at all possible, enhances an already good reputation, and that you will make sure that the reporting within the company, the ethics that are conducted within the company, the way we do business, all of that supports their reputation that they work so hard to build. It's amazing how long it takes to build a reputation, and it's also amazing how quickly you can destroy a reputation. And lastly, just an overall thought, and that is to make it tough to get into this club. If you truly believe that you're going to build something that's very, very large and very worthwhile, and you're giving these people equity, you are actually giving them a gift in exchange for their time and support, and it's not an insignificant gift. So I would think very hard about making it tough to get into the club of your board of directors. And if you approach it that way, if you deal with the issues up front that you may think might be an issue and just clear those with these prospects, you will put together a dream team that serves you well, gives you credibility, is incredibly impressive to your professionals and your financing sources. So it's time extremely well spent, and I think it's probably the most critical stage of the QLA process, when you don't have a track record to surround yourself with people who do, and the numerous benefits that you get from that. Okay, so if you have any questions or comments or ideas for future episodes, please email bruce@brucewhipple.com. And if you're not already on our mailing list, head over to brucewhipple.com and sign up and grab any of the free reports. That'll put you on the mailing list. There is a lot of free information you can use to acquire already profitable businesses. This is Bruce Whipple. Thanks for listening to the Business Acquisition Podcast. And remember, you miss 100% of the opportunities you failed to take. And procrastination truly is the thief of time. So do something today, please. Your future self will be proud of you.